Hey, Marilyn, how you doing over here?
Pretty good.
You about ready to go?
Yeah.
Let me check your horse, make sure it's double back. Yeah, looks good.
These are too.
This is going to be a little bit harder than anything you've done before, but I think you're going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
I think I'll be able to.
I got a reason. Questions in my head, I feel them in my heart. Answers I don't know of, I wonder where to start. I gave my will to Jesus and decided to trust Him. He gave me every reason to give up all my sin. I know what you're feeling, I've been there before. If you just let Him in, He'll be waiting at the door. I got a reason to walk the street narrow. I got a reason to fire like an arrow. I got a life that's always worth living. You gotta come along. You feel you should be running, though you know you're standing still. You know you could be something if you only knew His will. Emotions running wild and you're chomping at the bit, trying to work the pieces, but they don't seem to fit. I know what you're feeling, I've been there before. If you just let Him in, He'll be waiting at the door. I got a reason to walk the street narrow. I got a reason to fire like an arrow. I got a life that's always worth living. You gotta come along. I got a reason. I got a reason. I got a reason. I got a life that's I got a life that's always worth living.
As you make plans for your life's work, search for a marriage partner, or just hang out, what role does God play in your future? Can you really trust Him with your life? You may know what you want or what your parents want, but how do you know what He wants? Dr. James Dobson deals with those important questions in this program about finding God's will for your life.
What makes these sessions so important and the content that we're talking about so relevant to you is that you really do stand on the threshold today of so many major decisions when you think about it. In the next few years, you guys are going to make the three big decisions that are going to put in concrete what your life is going to be like. You know, you're going to decide what you're going to do with your life occupationally, whether it's a job or be a homemaker or whatever it is. That decision has to be made. It's an important decision. You're going to make a decision about whether to marry or stay single, and you're going to have to decide, if you decide to marry, who that person will be. And then, of course, you're going to make the most significant decision of your entire life, which will be the spiritual decisions about how you're going to live your life and for whom and for what purpose. Those three things are all significant, and they're coming down on you very quickly, and sometimes you have to make those decisions before you're really ready for them. Just in the area of professional choices that you have to make, what makes this so tough, it seems to me, is that you have to get 6 things together very early in life. First of all, you have to find something that you like to do, that you'll not only like to do now, but that you will perhaps like to do 30, 40 years ago. A dentist the other day said, "How dare that kid I used to be lock me into dentistry today?" He didn't even know me. He didn't even know what I would like, what I would want to do. But my daily activities are dictated by a decision that I made all those years ago when I didn't even have the facts. And that makes it tough. So you got to find something you like to do. You have to find something you have the ability to do. You may like it, and you're not good at it. Third, you have to find something that you get permission to do. You might want to go to medical school and they won't let you in. So you might make an excellent physician, and you might love to be a physician, but you can't get in medical school, and therefore it's blocked. Number 4, you have to find something you can earn a living doing. You might like to be an artist and nobody buy your paintings and you starve to death. So that won't work. So you got to find something that you can earn a living. You got to find something that society feels is important. In other words, there's got to be some feedback. There's got to be a sense that what you're doing is important, that you're making a contribution. And number 6, for Christians, you got to find something that God wants you to do. That specific something. Now, what makes this assignment so tough is that you have to get all 6 of those together. Have you thought about it? If you get 5 of them, it doesn't work. If you got all 5, but you can't earn a living at it, it doesn't work. If you got the other 5, but you hate it, it doesn't work. If you're out of God's will, it doesn't work. You got to get all 6 of those together. And that's a tough thing to do, and that's why so many young people today come through high school and college and kind of flounder, because they just can't quite get that all lined up. How does one find God's will in an assignment like this? I can't give you a real quick, simple, easy answer for that. But the most encouraging scripture that I can give you is from the 119th Psalm, where the Lord assures us that He will be a lamp unto our feet and a light for our path, right? Now, you understand what that's saying? He does not promise to be a headlight on your hat that shines 3 miles ahead of you and tells you everything that's coming. He promises to be a lamp unto your feet. What that means is you're walking along and you have a little lamp and it shows you where to put one step. And that's all the information He usually gives you, where to put the next step. And if you're honestly seeking His will, He will lead you in that way. Now, it is customary for people doing what I'm doing tonight, talking to you about the future, especially those who are speaking at graduation ceremonies and so on, to talk about the opportunities that are before you, to urge you to grab the gusto and go with it, to turn your potentiality into actuality, to reach for the stars, to accomplish something, to achieve. That makes sense. You know, I agree with that. The Lord makes it very clear how He feels about putting your talents in the ground, to not use the abilities that He's given you. But from a little different perspective, I want to say to you all tonight from my heart and from where I stand, that if your objective in your life is simply to achieve success and to reach some kind of materialistic or human goals, it will not satisfy. It will not be enough. Because that is empty, and life has a way of kind of trashing those objectives and those goals. Let me give you an example. When I was your age, maybe a little older, I was just coming into college, and I had one major interest in life, and that was tennis. I played tennis 4 hours a day, 11 months out of the year. Tennis was everything to me. Graduated from high school, went on into college. I got to the university that I was going to about 4 days before other people got there. And I was just walking around campus one day, and I walked into the main administration building and walked down the center aisle, and there, right in the center of that building, was the trophy case for the college. Here are all the trophies accumulated through the years. And right in the center of that trophy case was the big perpetual tennis trophy. Things about this tall, had a little man on the top, and a brass plate surrounding it. On that plate were the names of the tennis greats from that college, going back many years. I stood before that trophy case that day, and I looked at that trophy and I said, someday I'm going to get my name on that trophy. That was my highest objective in living at that time. That's what I wanted more than anything else. I wanted to win the school tournament, to be the best tennis player in the school and get my name on that trophy. I got my name on the trophy. In fact, I did it twice. My junior and senior year of college, I won the school tournament and my name went on the trophies. Quite proud of that. A few years ago, a friend of mine was up on that college campus and happened to be walking around behind that administration building where the trash is, and he found my trophy in the trash. Here I am, a legend in my own time, and the college throws my trophy away. It was of no significance. It was years ago. Who cares? And my record and my accomplishment, was forgotten. Since then, that friend took that trophy down to a trophy shop. That little man was broken at the top. He put a new one on there, and he cleaned it up, put a new wood base on it, and I have that trophy in my office today. So I said, if nobody else remembers my prime, I remember my prime. But anyway, the point is that if you live long enough, life will trash your trophies. You know, whatever you accomplish, if it is an end in itself, life will trash it. It becomes less significant. When I was 34 years of age, I wrote my first book. Dare to Discipline was the name of it. And man, it's a big, beautiful green book. I liked the cover, had my picture on the back. Pretty heady stuff for a 34-year-old guy. There are my ideas in there, and people are reading it and being influenced by it. Dare to Discipline. Not too long ago, a friend of mine found a copy of Dare to Discipline at a garage sale for 35 cents. You know, that's the way it is. The things that seem so significant, given enough time, are not really worth it. I'm a big football fan, and I'm a big USC Trojan fan. I don't know how you guys feel about USC, but there's really only one university, and USC is it. And you're shaking your head, and we'll talk about that later, okay? Especially when USC is playing Notre Dame. Somebody was wearing a Notre Dame sweatshirt last night. Who was doing it? Oh, there it is, right there, right in front. We've got some things to talk over. In 1973, I believe it was, USC was playing Notre Dame, and it turned out to be probably the best football game of all times, especially from the perspective of the University of Southern California. As I recall, we were behind 24-0 at halftime. And in the second half, I mean, USC just exploded. And a man named A.D. Davis, tailback for USC, Anthony Davis, scored 6 touchdowns, 2 of them on runbacks of the kickoff. I mean, I never sat down that whole game. I was watching it on television. I just cheering. And I mean, it was a high moment. And A.D. Davis was everybody's favorite after that. I mean, he was on talk shows, and he was doing interviews, and his picture was on the sports page of, I'm sure, virtually every paper in the country, because this game was carried on national television. A.D. Davis had his crowning moment. Boy, I mean, it was something. About 2 years ago, I went to another USC game. This time they were playing UCLA, and the winner was going to go to the Rose Bowl, and USC won. It was another big moment in the history of USC football. And I have a lot of friends on the football team and in the athletic department, and they invited me to come into the locker room afterwards. So I was in there when they were celebrating. And here came the team back in. Boy, they were hooting and howling. They were so excited, and they were cheering. The quarterback was on their shoulder, and the coach was on their shoulder, and everybody was singing the USC fight song. Really exciting moment. And then the press came in, let the press in, and they were surrounding the quarterback. Then I looked over to the left, and I saw A.D. Davis standing there. Anthony Davis, the hero from 1973. I don't want to be disrespectful to him, but he's put on a little weight. He's kind of got a little pot belly, which he didn't have in 1973. And he's watching this. And nobody is interviewing Anthony Davis. Nobody's saying anything to him. The spotlight was on these other guys. He knew what that's like. He'd been there. He had his moment. Now, it's all those years, nearly 2 decades later, and he's on the fringe of it out here, watching as an outsider. That really spoke to me. What do I really gain if I get it all? If I have the eyes and ears of the entire nation, I achieve that mark if it's an end in itself, if that is my only objective in living. And that's why I strongly say to you all, now this will sound a little morbid to you, I strongly urge you, when you're making those choices, at the top of the list, to give what I call the end of life test to your choices. Project yourself all those years to the time when you're on your deathbed and you're looking back at your life and you're examining what you spent it on and what was important to you, and you're weighing the things that are meaningful then. What will matter to you at that moment? Will it be the plaques on your wall? Will it be the money that you made? Will it be the honors that you achieved? Will it be the books you wrote? Will it be the songs that you sang? Will it be the number of times you were on television? Will it be the number of times you make a video like I'm doing today? Will it be an organization that you build, an empire? Will it be having your name on libraries and businesses? Is it really going to matter at that moment? You know what's going to matter to you then? What's going to matter to you then is what has become very, very important to me in my life as I move through those years. And especially when I lay in that hospital for 10 days and heard those words in my ears that I'd had a heart attack and didn't know what the future held. What matters to you, see, I've been there, so I can tell you what matters, what will matter in that moment will be who you loved and who loved you and what you accomplished for the Lord. And everything else is going to be pale and washed out. It's like a camera where you bring things into focus. I think it's also extremely important for you to understand from a Christian perspective that God will not tolerate second place. My father was a born artist. He knew he wanted to be an artist and announced it to his family when he was 3 years old. He just had an artist temperament. It was through all the veins of his body. It was in his blood. And when he was 5 or 6, 7, you stop him and if you'd ask him, what are you going to do with your life? He'd tell you, boy, I'm going to be a great artist. That was everything to him. And maybe because it was so important to him, the Lord gave him an incredible test. When he came into high school, he was walking along a street one day and he felt that the Lord spoke to him. There wasn't an audible voice. You know, God doesn't speak in the way that you hear with your ears. You hear it with your heart. But he knew he'd been spoken to. And the Lord seemed to say to him, this is what he felt, son, I know you love art, but I want you to be a minister to my people. And nearly scared him to death because he said, Lord, you already know. I got my life laid out. I know what I'm going to do with it. And you know that I care more about it than I do life itself. And he'd get it all argued down, get it put away, and get it settled, and here it would come again. Year after year, this thing was there, that God demanded that he be a minister. I think God demanded it of him because he had a tendency to be very selfish, and I think he would have sunk into an artistic life and would never have emerged as far as the will of God is concerned. But at any rate, when he came to his senior year in high school, he got out of bed one morning. When his feet touched the floor, the Lord seemed to speak to him again and said, this day you'll make a decision. Because his father had told him, pick out any school you want to go to in the country and I'll send you there. And he had to make a choice. Was he going to art school or was he going into the ministry? And he went to school with a heavy heart that day, knowing that this thing was hanging over him, and he couldn't deny it anymore, and he couldn't put it off anymore. Came home after the last class. The house was empty, and he paced back and forth in the living room, and he was struggling with whether or not to yield to the will of God in his life. Finally, he turned on his heel like this. He told us later. He looked up to heaven and he said, "It is too great a price and I won't pay it." And he said the Spirit of the Lord just seemed to leave him. He was just gone. And it shook him so that he was trembling, and his mother came home, my grandmother, and she saw it on his face. She said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And he said, "Mom, you don't understand this, but I've been struggling with a call to preach for 3 years, and I've just turned the Lord down." And she said, "Oh, honey, you're just emotional. Let's get down and pray." And they got down to pray. My grandmother could almost walk into the presence of the Lord. She just lived in His presence. And she stopped in mid-sentence and she said, "I don't understand it. I can't pray." He said, "You don't understand it, Mother, but I can. I've made my choice and I'm going my way." My father picked out the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and one of the fine art schools in the country, and he went there, and he was indeed a talented man, and he graduated number one in his class. They ranked the students according to ability, and he graduated number one. And as he was walking down the aisle to receive that award as the most outstanding art student at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, he heard the scripture ringing in his ears, "Except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain which build it." He took that degree and he came home and he couldn't find a job anywhere. This was in the Depression. I don't know if you've heard about that, but the country went through a time when people couldn't find work. My dad not only couldn't find a job in art for his big lofty dreams, he couldn't find any kind of job. He wound up taking a job pumping gas in a Texaco station just to try to feed himself. And the Lord left him out there till he got so sick of himself and sick of his lofty dreams that he was ready to come back. Now listen to this, folks. Talk about the power of prayer. His mother was praying for him all this time. He had no fellowship with the Lord. He didn't go to church. He had made his choice. He'd left the spiritual roots that he'd been raised in. His mother was out there praying for him. Right at that moment, the president of the Art Institute of Pittsburgh sat down and wrote my father a letter and offered him a job as a professor, as an instructor in the Art Institute of Pittsburgh at $300 a month, which was an unbelievable salary at that time. And if my father had gotten that letter, I would not be standing here talking to you today. But that letter got lost. And the president, instead of mailing it, got it mixed up in his papers. And some time later, 18 months later, found it, put it in another envelope, sent it to him and said, "I wondered why you never even did me the courtesy of answering my letter." And by the time the letter came, my father had gotten on his face before God and had dedicated his life to the Lord and had renewed his fellowship and had made his commitment. And when the letter came, he wrote back and said, "Thanks, but no thanks." And the Lord worked in his life in a wonderful way. But he would not take second place. Now, the beautiful part of the story is that as soon as my dad yielded his will to the Lord on this issue, God gave him back his art. And when he died, at 66 years of age, he was the head of the art department at a Christian college and had spent his whole life with not only the ministry but art. And God didn't take anything away from him. But he had to make a choice. The chances are pretty great that you will too, because God will not tolerate second place. He will only allow you to put him in first choice. Jesus is Lord of all, or he's not Lord at all. Anybody want to say anything? Yes.
Do you believe a secular profession such as art can also have a sacred calling?
I certainly do. I think it's possible for God to use you in any number of assignments, provided you remember what you're there for. You're not there for you, you're there for Him. Yes?
Do you think it's all right for a single woman to make it her exclusive career goal to be a wife and mother, or should they have some other?
Oh, boy. You press the right buttons, I'll tell you. You know, the society will tell you some different things, but I believe that is the most honorable profession. And it didn't have to be defended for thousands of years. It's only in the last 20 years that we've become defensive about that. But the possibility of taking a little child and training him and teaching him, introducing him to the God that we love, preparing him for a life of service to his fellow man, to his country, to God. I mean, what an assignment. It used to be said that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. I really do believe that. The entire next generation is at stake. This is no small-time stuff. That's worthy of both a man and a woman's time. Now, not every woman has to do that. It's her choice. But those who choose to do so should be honored. As far as the mother and father and their influence on the children, this is not going to be popular either. But I'll tell you what the research shows. The Harvard preschool study was a 10-year longitudinal investigation of what in the early home life contributed to well-being and intelligence in children later on. So they took these children very early and they followed them intensely in the Harvard preschool study and then identified the factors that are most important to those children later on. You know who's on the hook? Mothers are on the hook. The mothers were by far the most important influence on children. Yes?
Do you think a college career is wasted? Like if a woman goes to college for 4 years, gets her degree, and then decides to get married but wants to stay home with her family and raise her children, do you think that the college is wasted?
Certainly not. Certainly not, because you don't go to college to get a job. Or you shouldn't. You go to college to expand your world, to introduce you to information that broadens you, that changes you. It's a very worthy responsibility, even if you don't choose to use it occupationally. Right there.
In a situation where a woman would like to be a homemaker and also work outside of the home, after she goes to college, would you consider it better to first have a family and then apply her work, or first go to work and then later in life have a family?
I tend to feel it's better to get a little experience in working and get a taste of that. And it just might be, by that time in your life, you'd like to be a full-time mother. The problem with bringing several children into the world and having this very busy, active career with demands on you is that most people only have so much energy to expend in a given day. You get up in the morning, you get dressed, put the makeup on, and go through all this stuff, and you pack the children off to a child care center where a preschooler may spend 9-10 hours. You go to work, and with the coffee breaks and with lunch and with everything else, you don't get back till maybe 5:36 at night, and you got to start wearing out by that time. Then you go pick the kids up. They're delighted to see you. They've been waiting for you all day, and you're worn out, and you're trying to give them, quote, quality time. What's left? And you not only have to do that once, you got to do that every day, 5 days a week. When the weekend comes, you got to pay the checks, and you got to fix the roof, and you got to get the car repaired, and you got to get somebody to cut the front yard and all that stuff. And there's never a moment. What happens in that kind of situation is the children not only are deprived of what they need from you, but as a husband and wife, you begin to drift because there's no time for each other either. That's built for trouble. Some people want to do it, and some people do it well. And some people are going to watch this video and get very mad at me for what I'm saying right now, because they've done it and they've succeeded and they feel good about it, and I say, wonderful, that's your choice, and it's not my place to tell anybody what to do. I'm just telling you, most of the people that I've seen who try to, quote, have it all, exhaust themselves and wind up very, very frustrated.
Is it possible that you could believe that God is calling you to a certain profession, but it's just an emotional experience?
I think it's possible to misunderstand the voice of the Lord. Satan comes as an angel of light. What's that mean? See, light always represents God. So there are times that Satan wants to entice you. And this is why I believe that you don't react impulsively to a thought that blows through your head. You process it, you pray about it, you talk to the people that you have confidence in, you watch providential circumstances, and you ask the Lord to enlighten you. If we believe He is really there, and He really cares, and He really does have a plan for your life, then we have to believe that if you give Him the opportunity and you really search for His will, that He'll show it to you. One step at a time. Right here.
What kind of realistic goals can we set for ourselves without taking over God's role as the plan maker?
Well, you start with saying, what I want to accomplish for the Lord, what I want to do with my life. Do you know what the ultimate will of God for every one of you is? I just happen to know. Did you know that? I can tell you. And I can tell you what He wants you to do day by day. But if I understand the Scripture, the ultimate will of God is for you to cooperate with the Holy Spirit in reaching every person on earth with the gospel of Jesus Christ that you possibly can. That's our mission. It's to spread this good news. Spread the word. To go into all the world and preach the gospel. So somehow, whatever profession you choose needs to fit into that somewhere. And if it's strictly selfish, what I'm telling you is that even if you get it, it won't satisfy because it will be insufficient. Down here.
I'm a pretty competitive person, and I struggle with pursuing something with a dedication without crossing over the line and making it an obsession.
Yeah. Then you really need to keep that in check when you get into family life because work does that to you. Boy, it's so much fun. You can just pour, 12, 14 hours a day into work, and you can just feel so good about it because you're succeeding and you're getting patted on the back, especially if you're in a Christian ministry of some sort. Then you really got a good excuse. I'm doing all this for the Lord. And in the meantime, your kids don't know who you are. And they grow up so fast, and you wake up and they're gone, and you don't even know their names. That's the biggest tragedy in living, I think. Addiction to work may be the most prevalent of all. They call it workaholism, and most people in this culture have it. Right there.
If my desire is fully for Jesus and fully to follow Him in my life, but I have no idea what is going on or what I'm to do, is that enough?
One step at a time. Can't you imagine the Lord there looking at you and seeing those tears in the corner of your eyes and loving you and appreciating that attitude and your desire to serve Him? Can you imagine Him in your wildest imagination saying, I'm going to let her flounder. I don't care about her. He put His great arm around you and He'll lead you. If your heart is committed to Him, that's all it takes. He'll do the rest. All you have to do is listen. Yes?
From my earliest memory, my parents and my family have always told me, you can do anything you want as long as you keep your eyes on Christ and as long as you commit everything to Him.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. In terms of achievement and accomplishment?
Right. In terms of also determining God's will.
Well, they certainly have the priorities right. There's no question about that. As far as accomplishing anything you want to, I don't know how far that goes. Be President of the United States? See, maybe that's in contradiction to God's will. You have to let Him lead in your life. But I like the philosophy that they're expressing to you. Right here.
For the past couple of weeks, we have been learning a lot about what's going on in the world and how we can make a difference. But as a female, I have decided that I want to either go to law school or med school, and I could be in my late 20s by the time I graduate from grad school. But I also want to be a mother and stay home with my children and be a good wife. But I can't figure out in my life how I'm going to do that and become a professional too.
All I can suggest to you is that you go ahead with your plans if you feel like God is in it, if He's leading you. You get into school, and the resources are there to pay the bills, and you feel good about it, you've prayed about it, you've talked to people. Go on with it, and go on through and see what God does with you with that degree when you get out. You don't have to make that decision now. Just head on for that goal. You don't apparently have children yet to worry about, right? And the Lord will lead you, and there may be a way that you can use your influence. I tell you, we need women lawyers. We really do, who understand the family and understand these issues. I wish there were 20,000 of them out there that we could call on. God may be calling you in that area. But if He gives you a bevy of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed little children around your feet, you're going to have to find some way to take care of them that you can cross that bridge later. Yes?
I know I've had a definite calling to go into ministry, and I know that doesn't pay very much sometimes, and I'm wondering would it be God's will to, for me to first provide for my family or do His work? You know, how do I work out that?
Let me simply go back to the scripture in the 119th Psalm. He provides a what? Lamp where? To your feet. Now you're trying to shine that spotlight all the way over there to the time when you're married and you have children and there's a job, and trying to answer questions that the light won't reach to. See, He's calling you into the ministry. Take that one step, and then another, and another, and I think it'll be clear to you. We get into trouble when we begin to demand that the Lord give us all this information before we really need it. And somehow that helps me. I don't know if it does you. Yes?
With the general trend in society to place their kids in a public child care facility, what effect do you feel that will have on the kids as they grow up and as they become adults and just face their lives?
There is nothing that takes place in a group-oriented child care center run by people who are paid to be there that can possibly compete with what a mother and a father were intended to do at home. It simply isn't in the same league. Soviet Union, for a period of time, tried to get all children into child care centers and to free the mothers up for work. And they began unraveling that and abandoning it because they concluded you can't pay a woman enough to do what a mother does for free because her passion is those children. And the time that she spends with them, the time that her husband, the father, spends with them, talking to those kids, especially what's called live language is critical. Live language, where somebody is looking into the eyes of that child, answering his questions, interacting with him, telling him that they love him, and establishing his self-confidence. Television won't do it. VCRs won't do it. Recordings, records won't do it. No other approach, live language. You deprive children of that on a broad scale throughout society, and it'll be a very different culture and one that's worse for the wear. Let me leave you with one thought that for me is, as I implied a few minutes ago, is absolutely at the top of my list. This is a capstone on all of our time together. Some of you may be aware that I was a personal friend. I hadn't known him very long, but was becoming a very good friend with Pistol Pete Maravich. I don't know if you all, especially the girls here, you may not know who Pistol Pete Maravich was, but he was perhaps one of the top 10 NBA basketball players of all time. Some people would put him in the top 5. He was Showtime before Magic knew what Showtime was. I mean, Pistol Pete was an incredible basketball player when he was in the 8th grade. When he was in the freshman year, he was in the freshman year at LSU, Louisiana State University, he packed out the gymnasium. Everybody came to see him play, and then they went home because varsity wasn't nearly as interesting as this freshman. He went on, he set 43, I believe it was, 43 NC2A college records. He still holds the record as for the most points scored, not only the most points scored, but the highest average. He averaged 44 points a game throughout 3 years in college. I mean, the guy was unbelievable. His father was a coach. When he was 5 years old, 6 years old, he was spinning ball on his fingers and dribbling behind his back and doing all this stuff. He got it all. Went into the pros. He was the first $1 million NBA basketball player. First one to get $1 million. Did very, very well there. Earned huge amounts of money. When he retired, he was elected into the NBA Hall of Fame the first year he was eligible. You can't have anything in basketball that Pete Maravich didn't have. But he was a very frustrated man. He was bitter. He was rebellious. He had a drinking problem. He was bad news. I mean, he was, I don't even know all the details, but it was legendary of all the things that Pete Maravich had gotten into. And he hated life, and despite all of his success and all of his money, it wasn't enough. 5 years before I met him, his life unraveled. He had a bad knee, and he had to drop out of the NBA, didn't know what to do with his life. He went into his house because he was so famous everywhere he went, people hounded him. Went into his house, and he stayed there for 2 years and didn't know what was coming. He really didn't even want to live. And somebody introduced that man to Jesus Christ. And I mean, it was like putting a match to gasoline. Pete Maravich took all of that energy that he had put into basketball, and he turned it into spreading the good news about Christ. You couldn't be with that man for 5 minutes without him telling you about what the Lord had done in his life. And of course, the press didn't tell everybody that. They had told him all of the evil things he did, but people didn't really know this. He had written a book, and I invited him to come out to Focus on the Family, and I wanted to get better acquainted with him and ask him to be my guest. And one of the most arrogant things, audacious things I've ever done, I invited Pete Maravich to play basketball with me the morning before the interview. I told him, you know, we're just a bunch of hackers and everything, but it would really be an honor to have him out there. He said, you know, I haven't played basketball in over a year. I've been having this terrible pain in my right shoulder. And he said, I haven't really, the only game he'd played in the last year was the NBA Legends game. I don't know if you've ever watched that on television, but where the old timers come together. But he said, I think I'd like to do that. 7 o'clock in the morning, he came to the gymnasium where I played 3 times a week and played basketball with us. And it was really fun, and nobody tried to be a big shot with him and everything, and he played about a third speed, you know, and everything. And we played about 45 minutes. And we stopped, and the guys went to get a drink, and Pete and I stayed on the floor. And I walked up to him, and I said, Pete, you can't give up this game. You've loved it too much. And he said, you know, I have had such a good time today. I'm going to have to get back into just pickup basketball, sandlot basketball, they call it. And I said, I know you haven't been feeling well. How you feel today? And he said, you know, 2 weeks ago, I couldn't have picked up a 2-pound ball and gotten it over my shoulder. Because he said, brother, it's just this tremendous pain. And he said, it's neuralgia or neuritis or something. They don't know what it is. I said, how are you feeling today? And he said, I feel really good. He turned to walk away from me, and I turned, and for some reason, I looked back at him. I mean, 2 seconds later, Pete Maravich went down. And he fell hard. He didn't just slump to the floor. He fell, and his face hit the boards. And I thought he was teasing. You know, he had a great sense of humor, and I thought he was saying, you know, I'm 40 years old and I feel great, and then he falls over. So I thought he was teasing, so I kind of protected myself. I walked over to him. I said, Pete? You know, I thought he was going to get up. And then I saw he was in a seizure. And I rolled him over, and I held his tongue so that his air passage would be open. And I cradled his head and tried to hold him till his seizure was over. And it lasted about 20 seconds. And then Pete just writhed once like that, just moved his shoulders once. And he died. right there in my arms. What the greatest shock of my life. He's one of the great athletes of all times. He's a guy who, you know, did exploits on a basketball court that are almost inhuman, and this guy just died in my arms. And within 20 seconds, I was giving him CPR. I yelled for the other guys to come, and I began CPR, and the two of us did, and another one ran to get the paramedics, and we were working on him, and we never got another heartbeat, and we never got another breath, and Pete just went to be with the Lord. He was wearing a T-shirt. It's been 2 or 3 years, and it's still very, very, very real to me. I still, that moment is still with me. T-shirt said, "Looking unto Jesus." We went to the hospital with him, and they worked on him. Paramedics worked on him for 45 minutes. They never were able to revive him. It turned out that Pete had a congenital heart defect, didn't know it. He only had one major artery system. Most people have two that wrap around the heart. He only had one. And his heart had enlarged itself to allow him to do all those athletic things. But he was destined to drop dead somewhere about that time in life. And I think the Lord, I don't know why, but the Lord put him with me at the moment that he fell. Press came from everywhere. Within 30 minutes, the press was there, and I mean, I had an opportunity to tell all those people, you think basketball was his big love. That wasn't what he cared about. His love was his faith, his relationship with Jesus Christ. And I was able to give his testimony. It went all around the world. My cousin was in Guatemala and heard it within 30 minutes, so we had an opportunity to convey that message. But then we had the responsibility of calling his little wife, Jackie, and their two boys. He's got two sweet kids. I don't know how to explain all that. You know, I don't know how to, I still haven't sorted that all out. Why did the Lord take this man? But with Ryan's permission tonight, I want to tell you what happened next. I went home. I was shaken by this. You can imagine. And I sat down with Ryan, and I said, Ryan, I've got to say something to you. You remember that moment, don't you? I said, I want you to understand something. What happened to Pete Maravich today was not an isolated tragedy that occurred to one man and his family. This is not just something that happened to Pete. This is the human condition. It's appointed unto man once to die. It happened to him unexpectedly. But it's going to happen to all of us. And someday, somewhere, you'll get that phone call. You'll get that news that I'm gone. And it's at least possible that we won't have a last conversation. It's at least possible that what I'm saying to you now may be the last word on this subject. It's at least possible that I won't get to say there's several things now that really matter to me. So I'm going to say it to you now. And I'm asking you not to forget it. When that moment comes for me, and you hear that message that I'm in heaven, the one thing I want you to remember is a simple little message. To be there. Be there on the other side. On that good morning. Be there. I care what you accomplish in life. I care that you use the ability that the Lord has given you. I care that you reach your goals. I care that your life amounts to something. All of that is important. But it's not as important as what I'm saying now. Be there. I will be looking for you. I'll search across that city. And nothing else is going to matter. Live your life in such a way that you don't disappoint me on that day. Be there. I say that, pardon me. This is so intensely personal to me that it's very difficult for me to even express it to you and deal with my own emotions. But the most important thing I can say to you all on the edge of adult life, making those decisions about what you're going to do, how you're going to live it, the number one thing I can say to you is be there. Everything else is insignificant by comparison. And bring as many people as you can with you. And you will have lived a successful life. God bless you all. I really do love you all. Thank you.
I know what you feel.